Carmi. I'm hosting Ian Cummings and Aniba for the NFL Draft. Let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for spending your Thursday evening with us. I'm joined here by Ian Cummings from the Pro Football Network. How you doing today, bro?
Doing good, man. Another long day of not draft evaluation. All the work is done at this point. We're just synthesizing it. We got one more week to go, so the end is in sight, and all the preparation leading up to it. It's going to be, it's the cascade, the snowball effect. And then we get to the draft, and something completely unexpected happens, and it kind of erodes all the work, But hey, aside from that, it's good, man. It's good. It's the grind. It's what we live for, and I'm happy to be here with you,
100%.
man. It's been a while. We got to catch up, and we're doing it now. So I'm happy to be here for sure.
Definitely happy that you're here as well. I'm also joined by Aniba from the Burgundy and Gold Report. How you doing today, bro?
I'm good. Unlike a lot of people, I wish I could stretch this out like another month because I do all my evals, promoting everything by myself. So try to get through about 100 something prospects to watch, and hopefully I'll have about 33 scouting reports by draft night. But yeah, I wish I could just drag it on a little longer. It's really fun.
Both here. Like, I respect both these guys. I've known them for a couple of years now. This is their time to shine. It's a grind season with regard to the NFL draft and the evaluation process. So today's purpose is we're going to tap into their knowledge. Hopefully you guys in the chat can kind of jump in and kind of ask some questions as well. But today we're going to talk about the NFL draft holistically and kind of how it goes down. And I'll start off with Ian, man. So I know, man, the whole NFL draft prospect and the evaluations and just scouting reports. Like, I've done it on a very minute level, and I know you're really deep into it. Like, talk about your last month or two. Like, how's it been? Has it been extended like 2 or 3 months from now? Like, how long have you been doing these draft process, and how deep are you right now?
Man, it's been really since the summer, honestly. I mean,
Wow.
it starts in July, August, getting preliminary reports. And, that's why, the goal is to not be in the discovery phase for being in the discovery phase for as little as possible, right? You want to have a good impression of a player heading into the season so that you're not discovering like, oh, this is what he does. No, you already know what he does. How can he improve? And has he done that? Has he done what's necessary, right? So it's kind of, being ready for the next step at every stage of the process. So preliminary reports in the summer, and that kind of introduces you to the prospects. And some prospects stay the same. Others, they change their game a little bit. So you got to take it case by case. But then after the season, kind of rehashing that and seeing, how things have changed and kind of rewatching tape. And that goes on, Adam knows, I know, it's a volume based thing. There's so many prospects to, comb through. It's tough to cover all your bases, but, you get to the priority guys first, top of the board, and just work your way down and, just keep watching tape, make conclusions from there, and run it through your grading scale, your criteria, what you look for. And it's very repetitive. It's very draining sometimes, but, sticking to the process and staying bare to the fundamentals is the right way to do it. So I've been trying to stick to that this cycle. And this class in particular, man, it's been a fun one. Not as much blue chip talent as we're accustomed to seeing, right? And that's been a big storyline. But I do think there's a lot of depth in this class. I think, after round one, I think there is a lot of talent that can be unearthed if you know where to look. And that's what makes it so fun. Every cycle, man, there's gems to get unearthed down the line, and trying our best to get ahead of the curve there.
There you go. That's awesome. That's a great analysis. And you're an excellent writer. And if you guys haven't seen it, like, he writes for Pro Football Network. He's also part of the mock draft simulator as well. So you can see his content there. So I know Ian has done the work and kind of put in the time and effort there. Same thing with Adam Aniba, man. So Adam, I know you're deep in the whole draft process now and been kind of grinding for a while. So talk about your process and what you've been through.
Just like Ian, you start to look in the summer times, but I really try to, get that late season tape, so start to get in December. So really November, December. Again, I'm Washington, so it really depends on how the season goes before I put out reports. But I'm watching it all year long. And, sometimes you try to get a little ahead of it, like a guy evaluated from Washington State, Cameron Ward, ended up coming back. So that's the tricky thing about trying to get scouting reports out too early. I got his out in January. He decided to return. But yeah, I try to go through like as many prospects as I can. I try to narrow it down what I believe are targets for Washington. But I've got great guys like Doc Walker. I always like to talk to, kind of give me, some insight into some of the guys, he likes, especially, a Pac-10 guy. So I talked to him about Dorian Thompson from UCLA earlier
Yeah.
today. That was cool. So yeah, the evaluation part's great. I love to, interview the small school guys. You guys know that, that's my bread and butter. So I try to unearth those guys. So to try to get some, good tape on him by December, hopefully get the, hit on everyone by the time we get to the draft. It's not an easy task, but again, yeah, I really enjoy it.
It's just so fun because I think the NFL draft is, it's definitely subjective. So it's more, it's subjective. It's objective. You're kind of hearing from people, getting their different viewpoints and kind of analysis. And I love taking everybody's perspective, like you two, for instance, and kind of reading your stuff and kind of putting it all together. So I love that. And I kind of like what Ian said as well is about that. Like, sometimes you'll see somebody earlier in the fall and kind of have a judgment or perspective on him. He grows and changes over time, which I find very interesting. So let's kind of pivot a little bit. So obviously the NFL draft year after year, no matter what year it is, maybe except for last year, it always kind of circles around the quarterback position, right? So the quarterback position is definitely pretty intriguing. Ian, we'll start off with you, then we'll throw it over to Adam. Let's talk about like the top of the class. Let's talk about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. If you like them and kind of the rest of the depth of the class, how do you feel about that?
For sure. Well, the top of this class is definitely stronger than last year. Now, that's not a high bar to clear. I liked Kenny Pickett and he was my top grade, but he had a day 2 grade. I wouldn't have taken him round 1. So it's like, it's definitely a big difference this year. And we're seeing that now, the caliber of the prospects at the very top. What your order is depends on personal preference, right? But, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, to me, there's no wrong answer as to who your QB1 is. They all have viable arguments for that. And even Will Levis is in that top group. He's slightly lower than that top 3 for me, but, there's viable arguments for him going in the top 10, round 1 as well. So that group is very strong up top, and they all have different brands of what makes them so good. With Bryce Young, everyone knows the size, right? That's going to be a big talking point. It has been. We knew it was going to be. But the it factor, the quick processing, off script, and in the pocket, he can see over the middle of the field for his size. I think he's got decent arm talent, right? But the creation capacity for him is really his top selling point. With CJ Stroud, it's just the work in structure, right? He's very, very accurate, very situationally precise. I think he does have good tools. He's not flashy with those tools. I think he can be more comfortable off script, but he has the athleticism and he quietly has very good arm talent. Yeah, he can generate velocity with, a easy whip-like motion. I love that part of his game, mixing touch and pace on his throws. So big fan of him, what he provides. And then Anthony Richardson, the story is out there, 6'4", 244. The dude is a tank, but he's got rocket propellers on him. He's ran a 4.43, 40.5-inch vertical. He is, it's not brash to say that he has the highest ceiling we've seen in a quarterback prospect. Now, there is some refinement to undergo, but I don't think you're working from the bottom either. I do think he's shown flashes of growth, especially over a small sample size, just 13 games. He's still very young and he's growing and he's shown that he can process, anticipate over the middle of the field. His pocket navigation is very good for his age. So there is reason to be optimistic there. I'm a big fan of all those guys. They are clustered at the top of my board. Levis, again, strong arm, super quick release, very tough competitor, right? He's a good athlete too. So, you'd like to see that. And then farther down the board, those 4 guys are kind of separated at the top for me. After that, it's a big drop off. Hendon Hooker is talked about a lot. There's some questions about the offense, and I'm sure we'll get into him more in a little bit. But I think he does
follow up.
Yeah, I think he does have solid tools, right? But then other guys down the board too. Jake Haener from Fresno State, he's a guy that I like as a backup spot starter. I think after that top 4, what you're looking at is a lot of backup spot starter molds, which isn't a bad thing. You need that, right? Jake Haener, Clayton Tune from Houston is another one. DTR, as Adam mentioned, he's got the tools to be that role. So, there is depth down the line, but this QB class is unique in that I think there's a really established group of 4 guys at the very top, then a little bit of a gap. And then, you don't have that middle tier like we're accustomed to seeing. And that'll make things interesting in regards to the dynamic and where guys come off the board.
Gotcha. And quick follow-up question before I throw it over to Adam. So I'm seeing a lot of mocks, especially from like really high-end guys like Dan Brugler from the Athletic, people I really respect. They have Anthony Richardson all the way up at 4. Is that too rich for your blood, or how do you feel about that going to the Colts?
No, absolutely not. I would consider him number 1, honestly. I think in the NFL, you need to shoot for the stars, honestly, because in the playoffs, you might be playing a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert or Josh Allen. Sometimes it's going to be tools versus tools, and you might need that, right? It's one of those things where If you draft a guy with a lower ceiling but a higher floor, and he doesn't get you to the Super Bowl, you level out at 8 and 9, and you draft Richardson and he flames out, you go 6 and 11 or what? I can't get used to the 17 games, man. I keep going to 16 games.
Yeah, it throws you off a little bit, right?
Exactly. But
yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is the result is the same if you don't shoot high enough, right? As opposed to if you take that risk, if it doesn't pan out, at least you took that risk. At least you put all your chips in, right? Richardson has crazy tools that are worth investing in, especially if you feel like the Panthers are a good example. I don't think they're going to take him. It looks like it's Bryce Young. But the Panthers have a solid offensive line. They have Frank Reich, who's an experienced offensive mind. They have Andy Dalton as a potential bridge quarterback. They have Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, some solid weapons, right?
They have a lot of weapons. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. That's a situation where, if you were to bring A-Rich in there, that's a situation that can insulate his growth early. So especially if you have that supporting talent, that's a situation where you're like, hey, we might be able to get the best out of this guy. And if you can, you make that pick 10 times out of 10 because his ceiling is higher than anyone in this class.
I like that. I mean, he definitely has the raw tools. If you believe in the raw tools and believe in the development, then he's a worthy investment. Adam, what are you thinking? What do you think of the QB class, and what are your thoughts on everything?
I'm a little different as far as the top end guys, tier 1A, tier 1B. Young and Stroud are guys that I have in that first tier, no question. I agree with a lot what he said about Richardson. My thing about Richardson is the inaccuracies, and I know a lot of refinement is going to go on to the next level. You can't teach a lot of those physical tools, that pocket awareness, how he can dance around. I love that about him. But it's a QB-driven league. So if we're talking about overall talent compared to the prospects, Richardson and Levis, in my opinion, they're going to go way higher than they should. I think that they should be out of that top 10 range, just based on the guys I'm looking that are ahead of them. Some great offensive linemen, edge rushers, and corners. So I think I put Richardson and Levis in that tier 1B. But as far as, you start to get into, Tanner McKee, Hendon Hooker, guys like that, I think with Hooker, it's going to come back to, the injury, of course, and then the offense and age. So I think what's going to happen is, again, it's a QB-driven league, and teams are going to need the quarterback. And we keep hearing everyone say, Hendon Hooker with the injury, go to round 2 or 3. I'd be shocked. I think we're going to see 4 to 5 quarterbacks in the first round. And I think they'll take that year 1 flyer on him, because I think getting that 5th-year option is gold in this day and age, based, on the reasonable salaries that they have to play quarterbacks. I think, we're going to see 4 to 5 guys. But as far as, how far these guys will go in year 1, I like what I see in Young and Stroud. I think that those are guys that you talk about, Carolina and the Texans. Not the greatest squads, but we're seeing them slowly add pieces in free agency that are going to help them out. A guy like Richardson, I have him going to the Colts, so I have him going early. I think he might have a bit of a tough time because granted, you have a nice running back out there with Taylor, but they better draft some pass catchers, some pass catching tight ends, because he's going to need some help early on. But yeah, then you start to get later. I mentioned DTR. He's a guy that, I think over the last month, we've seen him climb up draft boards. It just happens during this time. People have been talking about 6th, 7th. I think it's more realistic in that 5th round range now. And like I said, I talked to Doc Walker about him and just some of the athletic attributes that he provides. I think people talk about switching positions. I think there's no need for that. I think he's the ideal developmental quarterback you want to have stashed on your roster. I don't think that there's a real threat. If somehow he gets your practice squad, someone's going to snatch him up. I think that's the ideal situation for Washington when you have Howell,
I agree.
Brissett. I don't think bringing in another veteran or bringing in a guy who's borderline undraftable. I did evaluate small schooler Shepard's Tyson Badgett, who led the nation, career 17,000 career yards. That's a guy that I like as well that can be developed, in the back end. But again, these are all guys you're talking about later in the draft. And I think what we've seen from Washington, I'd be shocked if we see any quarterback taken before round 4. Round 4 would be the earliest I think that would happen.
Interesting. That's a good take. And I like what you guys said about Hendon Hooker. I totally agree with you, Adam, that I believe that somebody's going to sneak back up in the bottom end of the draft, like a la Lamar Jackson, and kind of get that red shirt freshman year for Hendon Hooker on the team. I'm going to go throw it back to you, Ian. Is he a worthy investment? Because, he was at one point of the year, I think he had 27 touchdowns, 2 picks. He was, a Heisman hopeful. People were very high on him. But at the same time, there's questions about the Tennessee offense and it being pretty remedial and very simplistic, and it might not transit to the NFL. Are you worried about the injury history? Are you worried about his potential, not necessarily transitioning to the NFL? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm a little more apprehensive with Hooker. I want to preface with this: he does have talent, right? I don't think he has
Mhm.
an elite ceiling, but he is a good athlete. He does have good twitch in the pocket, and when you look for that lateral twitch to be able to evade rushers and create, and extend plays, he definitely has that for his size. He's got good speed and space. He's shown that he can, he's actually got some instincts as a runner. He'll have a blocker in front of him, and he'll kind of hide behind that blocker, manipulate defenders, and kind of draw them in, and then kind of cut out. So he's a smart player in that phase. And then in the pocket too, I think he has good arm talent. Again, not elite, not great, but good. He's got a little bit of elasticity. He can generate good velocity. So, you're working with a good baseline level of tools. And the knee injury, people bring that up as an issue for him. It's definitely an issue, right? In my opinion, it doesn't change much in regards to what the primary issues are because he suffered that ACL in November. The average recovery timeline is 6 to 9 months. So, you're not losing him for the entire 2023 season. Maybe he misses
True.
some time in training camp. For me, the bigger issue is the offense. And you mentioned it. You did a great segue into it. It was a very simplistic offense at Tennessee. A lot of one read plays, a lot of, stacked alignments and, spacing with Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman that frankly won't be sustainable at the NFL level. Plays where, he's only making one read. He's kind of reading the defense and reading the receiver and just kind of making that throw off of that read. If it's not there, a lot of times he'd either drop his eyes or kind of freeze up in the pocket. There's a delay from 1 to 2. So, the process to me is not super translatable for him. And
Mm.
I question whether he can carry that over, and especially being a 25-year-old rookie, that's another thing. Like Anthony Richardson, he's only 21 years old. So any of the processing flaws, right? He's only got 13 games under his belt, right? So it's one of those things where you'd
Only
like to
upside.
think that more reps can help with that. With Hooker, he's 25 years old. He started a little bit at Virginia Tech. He started 2 years at Tennessee. Maybe he might be set in his ways like this. And I'm not sure how much more you can get out of him, right? And you mentioned the redshirt freshman year. I mean, he's going to be 26 as a redshirt freshman if he does take the redshirt year. So it's
That's true.
one of those things where he has good talent. He does have good baseline talent. I don't know how much more of a runway you have developmentally for him. I don't know how translatable he is from that offense, and that's what gives me pause. I think at his maximum, he could be a solid backup spot starter. Jacoby Brissett is a comp
I'm
that
about
I've
to say that's what
yeah,
comes to mind when I think of him. Exactly
yeah,
right.
and I think if he was forced into starting, I do think he could hold his own a little bit, be a good spot starter. But is he a guy that I would invest in day two? Right, day two, you're looking at a developmental starter, a guy that you're going to stash for a couple of years, and hopefully maybe he ends up being an answer for you. I don't quite see that with Hooker. I think Hooker can be a solid backup spot starter, but that's where I draw the line. And for me, that's not worth day two capital. I'd rather support the roster elsewhere.
Gotcha. Makes sense. It's funny because people, it seems like if you want to get Hendon Hooker, you're gonna want to believe in him. You buy into his charisma. He's supposed to be a very charismatic leader. He's supposed to he's a strong, quarterback that you want to believe in. So maybe that's why they would get into it. But have heard there is apprehension. Everything you address is definitely there's some red flags there that I see. Before I pass it over to Adam, I just want to give a shout out to Steven to command this podcast. So you guys are fantastic guys. They're going to be on at 8 p.m. later on today. Definitely check out their show after this. All right, Adam, let's go over to you, man. How do you feel about Hooker?
You talk about Brissett. I see Huntley, Baltimore's backup quarterback. I see a lot of similarities in their game, and that's honestly about the ceiling that I see from him as well. A little more dynamic than Huntley, but a lot of the same attributes as far as a dual threat kind of guy. But yeah, I think again these quarterbacks are going to get pushed up by the need, and there's a big need because you keep seeing every year, first round, second round guys just aren't panning out. So I think when it comes to him, I think teams are going to look past the injury. I think it's going to be more about the interview process for him. But again, I think people are going to be shocked. You might even see him go in front of Levis. I don't think that should happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that.
Gotcha. Aaron Copeland in the chat. I don't know if you guys have dived too hard into this right now. He said he would be interested in Malik Cunningham late. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Do you guys like him? Ian, we'll start off with you, then go back to Adam.
It would be late, probably round
Late.
7, maybe PFA, right? He's very athletic, and I think that creation capacity is very valuable for him. His experience, he's shown that he can operate the quick game. When I watched him, the arm talent was really lacking for me. He doesn't generate very much velocity. really just substandard arm talent. And that's just a physical limitation, right? But I think the creation capacity, the athleticism, especially in a backup, what's the first thing that you're looking for? I want a guy who, when he doesn't counter pressure, he can actually evade and create and extend plays and, make something happen. And Cunningham can do that at the very least with that. And, he's fairly accurate in short range. Again, I don't think he's a guy that's going to extend your offense in the intermediate and deep ranges, but, as a game manager who can create a little bit round 7, if you have an extra round 7 pick, I wouldn't be averse to taking him.
Well, so all the way in round 7. That's actually a pretty worthy pick that late, in my opinion. But Adam, what do you think?
I agree 100% with Ian. Round 7 UDFA, because ideally you don't want that guy to ever see the field, but he's probably more in that ceiling of a QB3 with the team. And if you're unlucky enough that you have to play him due to injuries, you're going to really want to center that offense around him. Run a lot of RPO, a lot of quick game short stuff, because he's just going to disappoint you. I really, a couple readers told me, you got to check him out, Lamar Jackson 2.0. And I got on that 4th game, and I was just not seeing it. So by the 5th game, I dropped it, because that's what unfortunately happened with a lot of prospects, especially quarterback prospects. And I just don't see the it factor in him. I love the athleticism. I love what he can do when the pocket breaks down. But again, if you're going to try to, have a true passing offense and rely on him to, have multiple reads, he's not the one. So to me, even a UDFA is probably the more likely, but I think we will see a team probably grab him in the 7th round.
Gotcha. It's definitely interesting because college there is a steep learning curve. Like, obviously there's some colleges like Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. They have like that pro style offense. It's pretty, that high competitiveness amongst their players, but there are some where there's a large learning curve. So I can see that as well with him. Let's pivot a little bit. So, we are a Washington podcast. We're going to, and going into the draft, Washington's in the need for offensive tackle, potentially a cornerback. And I know that's a rather deep talent pool in this draft altogether. So let's start off with the offensive tackles. And Adam, will start off with you this time. Have you dived deeply into the offensive tackle class? Is there people that you find intriguing on this class so far?
Oh yeah, I hit on a lot of those prospects so far. Broderick Jones, Antoine Harrison, Paris Johnson Jr., DeJuan Jones, Darnell Wright, Jalen Duncan, Cody Mach. What was really interesting, I have to say, about DeJuan Jones is me and Doug just had Ryan Fowler on the show, and he was talking about how DeJuan Jones was one of the 30 visits for Washington. He actually canceled, and it came out that I guess it was pretty much told when I guess his agent asked that Wiley is the penciled in right tackle starter. So not a huge surprise, not huge money, but that $8 million range, I think we knew that was going to happen. But for a prospect to cancel that visit, but again, he's a prospect that has huge upside as a potential future right tackle. But unlike a lot of the prospects that we know that Ron Rivera likes, he's not quite as position flexible as some of the other guys. Same with the guy I really like, Antoine Harrison, but he's left tackle or bust. You get to Broderick Jones. That guy is just, as far as limited experience, I believe it was 13, 14 games at left tackle. But he's a guy that if he's somehow at 16, I really like that if they go that option. I'm someone with Peter Skoronski that just doesn't see it as far as left tackle with him.
He's a very polarizing player. People like want him, and they say all pro guard, not even a potential flame out of the tackle is what I'm hearing. So you feel the same way?
Yeah, maybe right tackle, but I think he could be an all pro guard. But again, are you going to take a guy for a guard that early? I just don't see that being a huge need, but I think a team will take him. Look at Chicago. There is a team that's going to probably try him at left tackle. If it doesn't right, they'll move him to the right side. But one of my favorite guys, as far as it's been on the right side, is Darnell Washington. So when I heard that from Ryan Fowler, I was a little bit disappointed because I think Washington will probably pass on the idea of getting a
Washington
right
or right. Because then we get confused. Darnell Wright, the UT tackle or the tight end? Right. Okay,
I said Washington. Darnell Wright, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a guy that's all time at left and right tackle in college, and actually inside, played every position but center. So I really like him. But I think Washington is probably pretty sold on what they have right now with Wiley. So I don't think that they'll be looking at a right tackle. So I think they'll be looking at that left tackle, guard, center. And a guy that one of my favorite guys in the entire class is Minnesota's Schmitz. That's a guy that although he could play a little guard, that's a guy that, he's a plug and play center. 10 years, you're good, because I think with the situation with Chase Roulier, 2 straight years on IR, I don't think it's a far gone conclusion that we're going to see some legitimate cuts like him, Logan Thomas coming after the draft. I think Washington is going to wait and see if they can address those positions, because you saw that they brought in Gates, the former Giant. That's a guy, another left guard center. Brought back Tyler Larson, who can do the same thing. So when I look at these offensive linemen, I'm really looking at position flexibility, and that's why I really like that.
We're going to bring that up in a second.
Cody Mosh, I really liked him out of North Dakota State. I don't see him as a tackle. He played every position on the line at the Senior Bowl, and I think he shined as a left guard. I think that's a guy that maybe at round 2, maybe round 3 if he makes it. That's a guy that you can just release Andrew Norwell and feel good that you have him and Paul battling out for that left side. But yeah, there's a lot of guys that I like on this offensive line in this class.
Very good. I definitely agree. And it's funny, you talked about position flex, and Ron Rivera talks about position flex ad nauseum. We hear that all the time. And Ian, someone who's evaluated over 170 prospects this year, is it, in your opinion, is it better to have position flex, or do you think it's better to be more specialized in one position? Obviously you can argue, if you can be talented across multiple positions, that might be a strength of yours, but at the same time, it kind of dilutes your true skill, in my opinion. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. What do you think, especially on the offensive line?
Yeah, I think there's reasoning for both, right? It really depends on what you need as a team, and usually teams, especially if you need depth and backups, position flex is very good, because let's say your right guard gets injured, or your left tackle gets injured. It would be nice to have someone who could play both spots, right? Now, that's wishful thinking for a lot of cases, but if you have a guy who projects well into that flex role, get him in that room and develop him up. And I think that there are a few candidates in this class that kind of fit that mold. Now I think whatever Washington needs, whether it's a developmental right tackle or a position flex guy, there are options to consider. I want to throw out Wanye Morris from Oklahoma as a developmental right tackle guy. I'm a big fan of his. He's a top 75 talent for me. Now, I grade heavily toward upside. I like traits. I like developing. I like building guys up. But he's 6'5", 307, 35-inch arms, ran a 5'11", 40-yard dashes at the NFL Combine. So super athlete. He was a former 5-star prospect, I believe, recruit. So, he's very explosive, very agile. And this past year, he actually improved his technique, his leverage management, his weight distribution. The hand usage can be a little more precise at times, the balance a little bit, but I do really like how he's trending up. So Wanye Morris, if they're looking at Wiley to start right away, I would get Morris in there round 3, round 4. That would be great. But there's other position flex guys too in that day 2 range. You look at Nick Saldiveri from Old Dominion, recently finished his evaluation. He graded just outside the top 100 for me. But he played all across the line at the Senior Bowl. He's another very well-leveraged, well-distributed lineman for his size, around 6'6", 320, right? But he wears that weight very well. Very, very easy athlete on his feet, but he's got good hands, good weight distribution, good leverage acquisition. So he's a fun one. Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse is another one. I would try him. Yeah, exactly. I would, because Charles Leno, his contract is up in 2025. So Bergeron could honestly be an eventual successor at left tackle. I think he can stay at tackle. He's around 6'5", I want to say 320, near 34-inch arms. But he's one of the most high-energy athletes off the line that I've seen. I mean, his foot speed, his corrective twitch as a mover at his size is very, very impressive. And then he's shown that he can use his hands to lock out, keep his hands tight. I'm a big fan of what he has to offer. Balance against power is one of his bigger issues, but if he can keep refining that, he's got a lot of upside too. So you have a lot of position flex. I want to bring up, Joe Tippmann as well. If you can trade back in round 1 and get him, if you're looking for center or guard, he's got that too. Very athletic, very powerful. So this class has it all, man. It's got a ton of options at every stage, and I can keep going down the list. But the fact of the matter is, if you're Washington, it might serve you well to double up. If you have a right tackle in mind and, a position flex guy on day 3, this is the class to do it, because even farther down the line, guys like Jordan McFadden from Clemson, John Gaines from UCLA, there are a lot of guys who project well and multiple. Malisala Amave Laulu from Oregon, the list goes on, but there are versatile guys in there to mold and kind of develop up through that lens. And I think Washington could take advantage of that.
Gotcha. And then Ian, from what I've gathered from watching, reading and doing draft scouting as well, Paris Johnson seems like the unanimous left tackle with LT1. Broderick Jones is kind of a polarizing figure with some deficiencies there. And then kind of Anton Harris is right below. That's kind of what I'm catching. You kind of rank them the same way, 1, 2, 3, or how do you view them? And, can you talk about Broderick Jones? Because I feel like Paris Johnson is going to be gone by the time Washington drafts. Where do you see the deficiencies for Broderick Jones possibly?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I'm not sure if it's going to go the way we think it will. I think how the order the teams have it could vary across the league. And
team
Paris
grades,
Johnson, Yeah, Paris Johnson Jr. is, I think he's a little bit higher ranked in the media, right? I could easily see him falling. We'll see what happens. But I know Broderick Jones has the traits, right? He's 6'5", 315, 35-inch arms. Now that's not, that's not anything against Paris Johnson, because Johnson's 6'6", 313 with 36-inch arms. So he's even bigger, even longer. These guys are just crazy talented, but Jones has that mean streak to him. That physical edge as a run blocker. He will finish you in the dirt. He's got crazy power capacity and knockback in his hands. And when he's on, some of his best reps are phenomenal. Pass protection, I want to see him keep refining his game there, because he can keep his torso too wide sometimes, heavily relying on two-hand extensions. When he needs to hand fight and combat opposing moves, doesn't always go very well. But the recovery athleticism, the core strength to stemmy rushes, I mean, all those physical tools are out of this world with Jones. And so that's why you combine that with that physical finishing edge that he has, that could easily win over an NFL team and make them say, that's my OT1, get him in my room, I don't care. Now, it's kind of a misnomer, because Johnson's physical is a finisher too. So it's one of those things where you don't want to double count
flavor.
One guy. Yeah, not the other. But we'll see. Johnson bends sometimes a little bit too much. He'll lean over a little bit too much. I want him to stop doing that. And he can keep his torso a little bit too wide too. But he's another guy who's insanely explosive, powerful off the snap, and that burst length combination that he has, it's unique to him alone, and that gives him a ton of upside. So, I see that. Anton Harrison is actually my OT2 behind Johnson. I'm a big fan of what he has to offer. I think of those three, he provides the best mix of, he's got high-end tools, but he's also fairly refined as a pass protector for his size. You'll see he's got very smooth footwork off the line. He can tempo his footwork to match rushers to the apex. He's got a very strong inside hand. He keeps hands tight to, absorb and, kind of suffocate rushers at the edge. So I'm a big fan of what he has to offer. And in run blocking too, he's shown that he has range, he's explosive, and he's physical. So, all these guys have a lot to offer at the very top. I think, who goes off the board first, it's going to be very much up to preference and maybe scheme fit too. But I think, it's not, these aren't guys that you can really shut off and say, oh, we can't do that. I feel like they're all pretty versatile. They're all very, very talented, and that's going to open up the door to a lot of different possibilities at the top.
Gotcha. I'm going to kind of go a different direction. We're going to talk about cornerbacks in a second, but, I just find this intriguing. Washington isn't necessarily in the wide receiver market, but, wide receivers are very interesting. Ian, I know that was kind of your baby when we was talking in our group chat a long time ago. I'm kind of curious about like the whole wide receiver class, and, if you guys have a favorite, if there's someone that stands out to you, and maybe like I'm just kind of curious how you rank them. And I guess we'll start off with you, Adam, if you're ready for that.
Yeah. I haven't dived too deep, considering that I don't see that as a need for Washington early. But I do like Quentin Johnston a lot. But as far as the overall depth and talent, I don't think that this class, I don't think a couple of years from now, these top 5 guys are really going to blow you away. A guy like, a little later, like Josh Downs, he's viewed as a second round, like he could end up being the best guy in this class. Zay Flowers, later on could be the best guy in this class, but it's just not one of those positions this year, luckily for Washington, because I think what they have in McLaurin and Dotson, I would take those guys any day over the top 10. It's just not, again, I haven't done full write-ups and everything on any of this guys' class, but I watched a lot of college football, and none of them are really screaming. You got to have them in the top 10. Some first-round guys for sure, but again, just like team need, Flowers, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Quinn Johnson, those guys are going to go relatively early, especially I think with the Texans. Once they grab their quarterback, I'd be surprised if they don't turn around and grab a receiver with that second pick. So I think it's going to be more with team needs rather than overall talent. I'm just not enamored with them this year.
I agree. I kind of see, like we were talking about in our group chat, Adam, I think like Zay Flowers or Josh Downs would potentially be a good fit for the Chargers, and kind of like loading up like a little slot guy with the, with Justin Herbert in LA. So it'd be kind of interesting. Right. But Ian, what are you thinking? I know you've been looking at some prospects. What do you think about the wide receivers?
Yeah, this class is definitely, as a draft analyst, I think one of the most important things is always to stay outcome independent. We don't know what this class is going to look like 2 to 3 years down the line. It's very possible that maybe it exceeds expectations, right? So I never want to say that it is weaker. On the surface, there is less guarantees. There is less certainty with this class. And, that's kind of why guys are falling down the board a bit. But I still think there's a lot of depth. I think there's a lot of talent to unearth. And I think that there's a lot of talent to build up if you have the right infrastructure for it. I'll give some favorites, but my top 5, I'll start with that. You know, my number 1 guy is Quentin Johnston, and it's Jackson Smith and Jigba at number 2. They're very close together. You could have it either way at the top. If you favor security and stability at receiver, then Smith and Jigba is your guy. If you want a guy who can be reliable out of the gate, and you know, he's got good upside too. He's very, very agile. He can turn on a dime.
Front runner.
Yeah, exactly. He's very nuanced. The cylindrical twitch in his game is just absurd. You know, he can offset defenders so easily. He's got great hip sync, great flexibility, but then the body control, you know, and instincts at the catch point too. He's got vice grip hands. You know, there's some of the catches that he made. I remember in 2021, there was one where his hand was like around the defender's back and he still caught it, right? It's one of those things like, you know, the dude just converts, right? And that's valuable. I mean, you need a chain mover in the NFL, a guy who can operate out the slot. I think he has the lateral agility and the size to, you know, 6'1", 200, you know, not huge, but I think big enough, strong enough to work against press too. So, you know, a lot to like with him. Quentin Johnston, you know, it's an upside gamble for me. 6'3", 206, near 34-inch arms. He's a big receiver and he plays like a small receiver, you know, and it's a blessing and a curse. And I want to preface by saying this. Some people say he can't win at the catch point. I think he just needs to be more consistent there. He has shown that he can convert and use his hands. He just needs to, you know, manage his length a little more efficiently. He doesn't really know how to control it sometimes, and he can work on that, right? But he also plays like a smaller receiver with his movements. I mean, uncanny how fast in short spaces he is, how amped up of a mover he is, insanely twitchy, flexible. You know, he's an elite rack threat in a 6'3" body. I mean, you don't see that very often. So, you know, I'm a big fan of that, and that's why I bank on that upside for sure. And he's also a pretty underrated route runner, in my opinion. Some of the comeback routes that he does, he can decelerate in 3 steps. I mean, he's explosive. This is a long striding athlete who gets up to his top speed very quickly, and he can snap it just like that with the snap of a finger, right? And so he can send defenders lurching. Big fan of that whole toolbox to work with. But those are my top 2. My third one is Cedric Tillman from Tennessee. I'm higher on him than most guys, but to 6'3", 215, very streamlined athlete, great foot speed. He's actually got good hip sync and route nuance too, and he's an alpha at the catch point. This guy converts. He's physical after the catch. He reminds me a little bit of Michael Pittman Jr. for the Colts, who I think went over 1,000 yards in 2021. I like that comp a lot. So I'm a big fan of his. He's one of the few X receivers in this class, and so I think that unique element is what will maybe lift him up for some teams.
Up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Number 4 is I'm trying to remember my rankings here. Josh Downs from North Carolina. I'm a big fan of him. A little bit lighter, but insanely productive. Yeah, he's gonna be slot menace at the next level. Explosive. Again, he's a route technician. He's got very, very good spatial manipulation ability. Doug Baldwin is my comp for him, so I think he can hit the ground running. And then you guys are going to like my comp for the 5th guy, Zay Flowers. My comp for him for a while has been Santana Moss. Yeah,
Santana Moss. Okay, I got you.
For sure. Yeah, I think Zay Flowers is one of the more energized athletes in this class. I mean, that's the word that I like to use for it. I mean, he is always moving, even if he's not. Like, it's just like, you know, the foot speed, the explosiveness, and just the sheer potential energy that he provides in any play, you know, is incredible. You know, he can stop routes on a dime. You know, he's got that whole 3-level ability to him. The one thing that lowers him beneath Downs for me is that Downs is a little bit more consistent when it comes to converting at the catch point with his hands, right? Now, Flowers has phenomenal body control, but he does let the ball get into his frame a little bit. So, you know, I wanted to improve that. But again, I'm a big fan of all 5 of those guys. And even farther down the board, Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss, Jaden Reed from Michigan State, Rashee Rice from SMU, A.T. Perry from Wake Forest, a few of my other favorites. But I do think this class has a lot to offer. I think there's uncertainty there, but again, a lot of varying molds. And if they reach their ceiling, it could very well pay dividends.
There you go. That's exactly right. It's very interesting. So let's kind of, we're on the final stretch. 3 more questions. We can start wrapping it up. So let's assume, this is a Commanders podcast. Let's assume Washington takes an offensive tackle or offensive lineman at 16. We're looking more at like the 2nd round, right? So looking maybe at the 2nd tier of cornerbacks. Ian, we'll start off with you in regard to this and go over to Adam. So 2nd tier, in my mind, I mean, obviously you have more knowledge than I do. I'm looking at Emmanuel Forbes, DJ Turner, Julius Brents, people of that nature. I'm assuming a lot of them will be gone, but who do you like of that group? And maybe even where could Washington pick a cornerback at 47 in your opinion? Who would you go with that route?
Yeah, I think at 47, the first names that come to mind, and hopefully they're there. I mean, you said it. It's not a given that they will be there, but the first names that came to my mind, so we're on the same page here, Julius Brents
Hmm.
and DJ Turner, especially for
Hmm.
Washington's scheme. Rush four, you want to get organic pressure with that four-man front and then use press corners to delay releases and kind of put the quarterback in a quandary, right? And I think
Yep.
two guys that really emulate that the most, and they're both unique fits for Washington. I think Julius Brents, I mean, the size kind of stands out, right? 6'3", over 200 pounds, 34-inch arms. Those are arms that some offensive linemen, Peter Skoronski, would be jealous of those arms, right? So that's like,
He would. He
it's
definitely would.
you don't expect that length from a corner, but I mean, he uses all of it too. He's extremely physical at the line. He really gets in your grill. He's just so aggressive when it comes to attacking receivers at the line. But then he's a twitchy
Mhm.
athlete, high energy athlete for his size. He kind of moves like a water bug on the field sometimes. It's tough to shake him, man. But especially with that length too. I mean, he's got great recovery speed, explosiveness, right? You can get a step on him, but he closes the gap just like that, and his disruption window is very, very wide because of that length. So big fan of Brents. He's great in run support too. DJ Turner is a unique fit for Washington, not quite as big as Brents. I think he's a little bit lighter, but the recovery speed is insane with him. I think he ran a 4.26, right? That shows up on film. I mean, his closing speed is
Turner.
insane. Yeah, he's another guy who's physical, chippy. He's got
He's a
good zone
fighter
awareness, I
too.
think.
Chip,
Yeah,
very
he's a
chippy.
fighter. I mean, everything about him is high energy, from the physicality at the point to his foot speed when he's matching guys, recovering and kind of maintaining spacing and positioning. And then on top of that, too, he can play the slot or the boundary. And I think that's another very valuable aspect for Washington in particular. If you need him to move around a little bit, he can do that. And I think do it at a high level. So could Forbes slide to 47? I saw the question kind of pop up on the side there. I think Forbes could. He's very, very light. And that's, we've seen the NFL teams have kind of stringent size thresholds that they stick to sometimes. Now, sometimes they don't, but especially with Forbes being in the 160s, right? I mean, that's very light for a corner. We've seen on tape. I don't think it's too pressing of a concern on tape. He's shown he can play beyond his size and kind of play beyond that frame. But for teams that have size thresholds, especially in this corner class, looking at the top of the class, you're looking at a lot of plus size speed athletes with guys like Deonte Banks, Christian Gonzalez, Calais Ringo, Tyreek Stevenson, even Jalen Jones, Joey Porter Jr. There's a lot of talent where the size is working in their favor. It's working against Forbes. So could he slide to 47? I could definitely see it. Would I take him there if I'm Washington? I would consider it for sure. I do question how his frame would kind of hold up in that press man
Okay.
scheme very often, but I do, I can't deny, the zone awareness that he has, the instincts to break on passes early and make plays. I mean, he broke the college football record for pick sixes, right? So that kind of tells you all you need to know. I mean, explosive, instinctive, another guy who's very aggressive. He's a gambler, but it pays off for him. So, if you're willing to kind of mold your scheme around him a little bit, right? You don't want to get him in those physical situations, because if you're going up against a 200-pound receiver, odds are they're going to be able to outmuscle him. But I think he's talented enough. You would consider it for sure.
Definitely. And thank you, Arch, from the 54th. I appreciate you with that question there. Thank you, Ian, for answering that question. I appreciate it. Let's kind of sit on this for a little bit. I kind of like the whole cornerback conversation. I'm very intrigued by this. Adam, I want you to talk about, some of the corners that you like, maybe in the first or second round. Like, are you a fan of Deonte Banks, Joey Porter Jr.? Like, I want to hear about all this stuff and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Porter and Gonzalez were two of the ones I first evaluated. I don't think they're going to be there at 16, although I think both of them could do really well with Washington. A lot of people talked about the concern with Porter, scheme fit. I think a guy like that, an athlete, the length, the athleticism that he poses, I think any team can find a role for him. But, we're talking about Forbes. He's a guy I just finished writing with, and I agree with Ian. Although he could be slipping into that first round, 14 career interceptions. You talk about a ball hawk, a guy that's always around the ball. Someone said to me today, last year, four out of the 6 of those interceptions last year were tip balls. Doesn't matter. You're a ball hawk. You're around the ball. So if he somehow in that 47 range falls to that, I think you take that. And I don't think that that's the situation for every team, but I think when you have a front line like Washington that's going to be able to apply the type of pressure, I think having a guy like Forbes that, that can just drop back and kind of survey the field and have everything in front of him, he'd be ideal. Same with Brent. I really like Brent. I like his length, definitely not as light as Forbes, but he's a guy that I really like in that second round range. But, you pretty much touched on all the guys in that second round range. 2 guys, that I'll mention, maybe that day 3 range that I actually interviewed, the small school guys I talked to. Justin Ford of Montana. He's a guy, 11 career interceptions, only 2 last year, but only 2 last year because opposing quarterbacks just stayed
totally.
away from him. They shied away from him. Good size, 6'2", 200. He's a really, he's not going to be one of the burners like some of these early round guys. So, that 4 or 5 range is slipping him, later part of the draft. But I guess I'm one of the few that I know that's really high on him because I think, that 3rd, 4th round will be ideal for him. And another guy that I just interviewed the other day, you talk about Washington really needing to address that kick return, punt return game, is Isaiah Bolden from Jackson State University. This is a Florida State transfer that if he stayed, he could be in the conversation for that, top 40, 50, range, really good size, 6'2", 200 plus, loves to mix it up. That's a guy, if you watch the primetime show with Deion Sanders, he's a guy, Isaiah Bolden, and then another guy that I evaluated, Aubrey Miller Jr. from Jackson State. They were really, high on Deion Sanders' list of, really, guys that exceeded expectations that, one would argue if they went to Power 5 schools that they'd be household names by now. But these are a lot of the guys, because I even think if they can go a cornerback in 1st round, 2nd round, I really think they need to double dip, because if you're looking, with Benjamin St. Juste, Fuller, and Dantzler they got on waivers, nothing is inspiring with this cornerback group, in my opinion, especially with BSJ and what he's dealt with injury history. I'm not sure to just crown that guy, QB1 for the foreseeable future. I think you got a lot of QB 2s, 3s, 4s, and you really got to find that guy. And if you're not going to find that guy, I think you get a couple until you get it right. So, like I said, Justin Ford, Isaiah Bolden, those are 2 later guys I like, but you guys really touched on those second guys in Brents and Forbes. And, even we talk about Williams from Syracuse. I'm not sure if he is the ideal fit, I've only watched a couple games on him, but they're going to have a ton of options in that 2nd round. So if they can, let's say get a guy like Anton Harrison in that 1st round, they'll be in good position to grab one of those cornerbacks in round 2 or even 3.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. Before we transition, I want to just give a shout out to Yam from Japan. Yam's awesome, man. So all the way from Japan watching our show. I really appreciate that. Thank you for dialing in. He says, I'm late as always. We'll catch up later. I appreciate you following, man. And then Ian and Adam, I know I promised you 45 minutes. Can you guys hang on for another one question or two? Are you guys good?
Of course.
For sure.
You guys are good? All right, sweet, man. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. So let's kind of like bring it back. So real quick, rapid fire, Ian, then I want to talk about 2 more positions. I like Deonte Banks. I'm a Maryland guy. I'm kind of curious what you think about him.
Rapid fire is tough for me. All right, I'll try and keep it below 20 seconds if I can. He's my CB3, size, speed through the roof. I think he had like a 4.3 something, 41.5 inch vertical. He is one of the smoothest athletes with that explosiveness. You don't see guys as flexible, as elastic as he is at his size. He's got to keep improving his technique, I think, but he has shown that he can use disciplined footwork, feet first at the line. He's very physical. I want him to be a little less hasty at times. Sometimes he can be a little late to get his head around when he's playing the ball, but I think all the tools that you need are there. And on top of that, he's got that physical edge that you want to.
Would you get him at 16?
I would consider it for sure. I think that physical demeanor, that foot speed at the line, the agility and the recovery explosiveness, all the tools that you need to play that press man role. He's just got to keep refining his technique, but at his ceiling can easily pay dividends down the line.
Gotcha. All right, let's do another 2 quick fires. We'll get out of here. So Ian, one more, then I'll throw it over to Adam. Adam sees us all day. Me and Adam are in a lot of group chats together. Bijan Robinson, they always talk about him as a running back in the 1st round, generational talent, quote unquote. Is he truly abnormal where you have to get him in the 1st round, or is the running back class deep enough where you can get someone later? And Washington's in the market. Could there potentially be a 3rd round pick or 4th round pick that you'd be interested in or you recommend?
Oh man, that's a tough one. All right, I'll sit on the fence here. He is different. You're not going to get a Bijan later on. Would I take him in round 1 with Washington with the needs that they have? I would be hesitant because you do have so many needs. Bijan is my 2nd overall prospect. He's a near generational RB prospect for me. I mean, he's as good as the hype implies. But if you're Washington, you have other needs, and you have Brian Robinson, who's a solid workhorse. I was pretty high on him coming out, and I think if you have a stable offensive line, he can do good things for you. Antonio Gibson, going to be a free agent next year. So if you are going to get a guy on day 2 or late day 2, early day 3, I would err towards the guy who brings passing value. And a few guys that kind of come to mind for me, Keaton Mitchell from East Carolina is one that I really like. Very smooth runner. He's got really good contact evasion ability. He slips through tackles. He doesn't barrel through, but he's very good at staying on his feet and recalibrating. And he's a very good receiving threat. So Keaton Mitchell, maybe Kenny McIntosh on day 3, if you can get him. Another guy who's a long striding athlete. Very, I think he plays faster than he tested, but a very nuanced receiver who can run routes and make plays beyond his frame.
Gotcha. Adam, want to touch on that?
Yeah,
What's up,
piggyback
Hawk?
off of that, I wrote about Mitchell as well. Love him in the receiving game. But two other guys, first one I wrote, Tajay Spears out of
Yeah.
Tulane. Talk about receiving ability. He showed at the Senior Bowl. He had guys on skates trying to cover him in his route. So this is a guy that's really well nuanced in the route tree. So I really love him. Deuce Vaughn, Kansas State too. So I'm also looking when I'm looking for that for this year for that third running back. What do they have special teams value? Not a ton of production for any of the guys we're talking about as far as return, but they do have that pedigree, that background. So, Mitchell, Spears, Vaughn, those are three guys that I really like in that day 3 range of the draft because I think, McKissick was cut. Gibson, no matter good or bad, I think this is his last year. They have to look towards the future, and those are some really good guys.
Gotcha. Want to say shout out to Hawk in the chat. Thank you for dialing in. I appreciate you watching. One quick question for you, Art. Sorry, one more quick question for you, Ian, from Art, and then we'll wrap it up with our last question of the day. So Arch is asking, are there concerns Bijan gets caught from behind at the next level and the level of competition that he faced this year?
I think it's not too concerning for me. I mean, when you're talking about long speed for running backs, it's not at the top of my grading scale. What I put on the weight. I think explosiveness is more important. He's explosive enough. He's not elite in either area, but I think the thing with Bijan is he's just so good at creating yardage that by the time you're catching him from behind, he's probably already gotten like 10 to 15 yards, right? So that's hyperbole. Not every run is going to be like that, but Bijan has the thing that makes him special, and I feel like it's important when you talk about, how good he is, it is important to explain why he's so good. At 5'11", 215, obviously has physicality and contact balance, but, for his size, having that workhorse frame, he is incredibly flexible through cuts. I mean, the agility, the short area agility, the ability to bend and halt his momentum so suddenly, it's insane. He can put defenders on a string. And on top of that, he processes angles and space very, very quickly. So he can be ahead of the curve and he can act on that immediately with his short area athleticism. So he's an elite creator. He's a master of space. And, he ran a 4.47, I want to say. So he doesn't have bad speed, just not elite breakaway speed. But he has enough to stretch space when he has them, and he's so good at creating space for himself, even when the blocking isn't there, right? So, I think that's going to give him a safety buffer at the next level, allow him to become that running back that we all want him to be, right? Does he have breakaway speed? No, but I don't think it's going to matter too much. I think his profile is so solid beyond that he'll be able to make it work.
Gotcha. Thank you for that question. I was going to throw this to you, Adam, because you're more of the commander-centric guy. Hawk threw this in the chat. He says, gents, given that Coach Ron is on very, very thin ice, are we one draft away from having a prominent run like the Eagles? How do you feel about that?
Oh man, anything could happen. If you talk about if the offensive line can stay healthy, if Sam Howell really puts it all together, he's got the weapons. So I don't think it's out of the question. But you got to be looking. What can the defense do? So if they can, get at least a true, QB, a quarterback one. Cornerback one, they could really challenge the other guys on the team. Because I'll say it, I'm just not comfortable with what they have back there. I really like Curl. I really like what they have in Force in the front line, but I think those corners are big question marks. So if you can get a couple, because right now I think they're just hoping these guys pan out and stay healthy. But I really think that if a couple things can go right, yeah, they could definitely have a run like that. But again, I think you need to beef up the positions that need to be addressed in the offensive line. No matter what Washington fan you talk to, they want to draft an offensive lineman in every single round. But I have no problem with grabbing a couple offensive linemen. But once you grab a guy in those first 3 rounds, you better hope that they're going to contribute this year. So you're not going to really want to get backups who aren't going to see the field. We talked about offensive linemen, and I really like the top end of this draft, but I do think there'll be a run of a couple of them before it gets to Washington. So will Washington, take the 4th best offensive tackle on the board, or like you mentioned, Banks or even Porter, the maybe the 3rd or 4th cornerback on the board. So I think if they have a good draft, we've seen them actually have more success on that, day 3 range. they need to have some more success in that 2nd round. And I think once they can do that, they can put it all together. I definitely can see a situation, with Eric Bieniemy right now. I think that this gives this team hope for innovation because they've been, running a dinosaur offense. Even with Jay Gruden was here, everything was behind, nobody was clicking. But I think if EB really has been given the reins, I feel confident because I've been, pounding the table for him as a potential head coaching candidate.
I agree.
And I think it's not just because of Kansas City. I just think, everyone talks high about the Belichick disciples. What about the Andy Reid guy? So I think that, he's the next one in line to be really good. And I think he has the ability to get the play calling over the top for Washington, and getting 10, 11 wins is not out of the question. And I think, that'll get you to the playoffs.
That's a great answer. Fantastic answer, Adam. I like that a lot. You inspired me on that answer right there. I appreciate that. All right, let's do this. A fun little last minute exercise. We'll wrap it up. Ian, who is one draft? Sorry. Give me one draft prospect because you are very high on. Could be in the first round, could be in the later round, and one that you are not so high on in regard to popular opinion. What do you got?
One that I'm high on, I will go with Texas defensive tackle Moro Ajomo. He's commonly referred to as a day 3 guy. He's my 70th overall prospect. I'm a big fan of the tools that he has. Around 6'3", 290 range, but he's got over 34-inch arms. So he's very well leveraged with that size, but then he's got elite proportional length, and he's also very explosive. I think he ran in the 5-second range with a 40-yard dash. He had a 33-inch vertical, and I got to see him in person at the Shrine Bowl. He was a handful for everyone because he can so easily get under you, but then with his explosiveness and length, he's got elite power capacity. So he just drives straight through. He's already a very, very good run defender, and I think he's got very high pass rushing upside. So I would bank on him any day, and I got to speak to him too. A very smart individual as well. So I'm confident in his ability to develop. Lower on, Zach Evans, running back, Ole Miss. He's very athletic. He's very talented for sure. A former highly touted recruit. And I do think that the flexibility that he uses while accelerating upfield, a very unique, very special part of his game. That said, he's been getting day 2 hype, early round hype. I have a day 3 grade on him. I think he's just not quite as versatile as you want to be in that range. He's not very proven as a receiving threat, and he doesn't provide a ton of utility as a pass blocker, which for coaches, that's important. Can you stay on the field on third down? So a little lower on him. I still see the appeal, but that would be my answer there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Adam, on you.
Yeah, I'll stick with the offensive line, and I'll go back to Cody Mauch of North Dakota State. Again, I love position versatility, and the fact that he came in there as a former tight end, had success at left tackle, but then came in the Senior Bowl and played every position and just looked great. He's a guy that I really like as a left guard prospect. Again, he can play any position, I really feel like, but I don't think that his ceiling is on the outside in the NFL. And a guy, we'll bring it back to, Peter Skoronski of Northwestern. I'll go early. I'm not high as a lot of people are. And it's not just the arms. It's just what I saw from him. I think that he will be a good interior guy, but to come in that, top 10, 15 range, and you're talking about, left tackle, right tackle, I'm just not seeing it. I think that he could be legit inside, but yeah, I'd give a lot of pause about selecting him in that top 10, right? I don't see it.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. Guys, fantastic content as always. I definitely love working with you. I asked you guys for 30 minutes of your time. I ended up doing an hour because your content is so great. I really enjoyed talking to both of you guys. Speaking of which, Ian, can you talk about, where can people find you on socials? What are you working on? What projects you doing? Kind of fill everybody in on that.
Yes, you can follow me at IC_draft on Twitter. Pro Football Network is at PFN365. We are almost there, man. The draft is almost here. So I've got my big board releasing soon here. I just submitted it today, my official top 300 big board. So that'll be out soon. We're going to be doing top 10 rewrites. We've been doing those, but we're going to be transitioning to 2024 pretty soon here too. So we've already gotten an initial board in the works. We've got top 10s in the works. So I had a 3-round 2024 mock draft recently. So keep an eye out for that. We are turning the page pretty quick here, but you always got to stay on your toes. So it's a fun time, but at the very most, keep an eye out for, and kind of buckle up for the 2023 NFL draft next week. It's going to be a fun one.
Definitely, for sure. Adam, how about you, bro?
Yeah, always find me on Twitter at the B&G Report. And again, at my website, the Burgundy and Gold Report.com. We have a section of 2023 NFL Draft prospect cards. You click on the card, you get the full scouting report, top to bottom, 6 to 8 games evals. But also, we always have Washington articles kicking out. So yeah, check us out, the Burgundy and Gold Report.com.
Definitely, guys, give them a follow. And I am George Carmi at GCarmi21. I write for FullPressCoverage.com. This is the Command the Mic podcast. I really appreciate you guys listening. Have a great rest of the night. Peace out.